The night settled heavy over the neighborhood as Anna carried the last box into the hollow silence of her new home. The air inside felt thick, as though the house had held its breath for decades. Dust clung to the walls like faded memories, and shadows lingered where light refused to touch. Anna said, "This place feels older than time itself, yet it waits for me." Her voice echoed strangely, as if someone whispered it back to her. She shivered, clutching her jacket tighter, though no wind stirred. A faint creak beneath her feet made her freeze, her pulse thrumming louder than the quiet around her. From somewhere below, too faint to be real, came the shrill edge of a scream that sliced through the stillness. Anna gasped, dropping the box, and the sound of shattering glass rang out like a warning. She said, "Who's there?" Her voice cracked, swallowed by the dark. The house seemed to breathe, answering with silence, yet she knew she wasn't alone. The cellar door rattled once, then stopped. Anna whispered to herself, "It's only the house." But deep down, terror rooted itself in her chest. Morning light streamed weakly through the dirty windows, yet the house refused warmth. Anna walked into the kitchen, her steps careful as though the floor might betray her. She said, "It was only a dream," but her voice lacked conviction. She traced a finger over the cracked countertop, feeling a residue of dust, and something sticky she did not want to name. Her stomach churned at the memory of the scream. She opened the faucet, but the water sputtered and groaned, finally spilling out a thin, rust-colored stream. Anna whispered, "This house is alive." The silence that followed seemed to listen. Somewhere in the distance, the cellar door creaked again. She set her jaw, determined to ignore it, but her reflection in the dull metal of the sink twisted strangely. The distorted face stared back, its mouth moving, though hers remained still. She gasped and stumbled back, knocking over a chair. The sound crashed like thunder through the empty house. The echo mocked her, making her feel foolish, but deep down, she knew the house mocked her too. Anna tried to distract herself by unpacking the boxes, but each item seemed wrong in the house. A framed picture slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. She said, "Not again," her breath quick and shallow. Picking up the glass, her fingers trembled. A photograph of her family, smiling and safe, seemed out of place against the darkness surrounding her. She set it aside carefully, but the frame cracked further as though rejecting the image. A gust of air brushed past her, stirring her hair though the windows were closed. She whispered, "Stop it," but the air whispered back. The sound was faint, like a child's laugh carried through hollow walls. Anna's skin prickled. She clutched the broken photograph tighter, drawing blood as glass sliced her hand. She hissed in pain, dropping the pieces. Blood smeared across the wooden floor, bright against the dull brown. The house seemed to sigh, as though it had finally been fed. The afternoon dragged on, oppressive in its stillness. Anna found herself drawn to the cellar again. Each step closer to the door felt heavier, as though unseen hands pressed against her. She whispered, "Just a door." Her fingers hovered above the knob. The wood was splintered, scarred by something she could not name. Suddenly, the air thickened, carrying the faint smell of rot. She gagged, stepping back, but the smell clung to her nostrils. From the crack beneath the door, a faint light pulsed once like a heartbeat. Anna's chest tightened, and she stumbled away. She said, "No, not now." But her voice cracked. The light faded, leaving only darkness behind. The silence afterward felt cruel, mocking her hesitation. That night, sleep refused Anna, the house filling her dreams with broken echoes. She woke in sweat, sitting upright in bed. Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating her trembling form. The sound of footsteps creaked above, though she lived alone. Her breath caught as the footsteps grew louder, pacing deliberately across the ceiling. She said, "This isn't real," clutching her blanket tightly. The footsteps stopped suddenly, and silence fell heavy. Her chest heaved as she dared to breathe again, only to hear the faintest whisper at her ear. She turned sharply, but the room was empty. She whispered, "What do you want?" Her reflection in the mirror across the room stared back, but the mouth moved on its own, shaping words she could not hear. The whisper came again, this time from the floorboards beneath her bed. The house had found her. The following morning carried no comfort. Sunlight filtered through streaked windows, pale and thin, unable to drive out the unease. Anna sat at the small wooden table, staring at her untouched cup of coffee. She muttered, it was only the house, nothing more. Yet her hands trembled, the cup rattling softly against the saucer. A sudden knock at the door startled her. She rose quickly, her chair scraping across the floor. Standing there was James, the neighbor who had stopped by earlier to check on her move. James said, "You look like you haven't slept at all." Anna forced a smile that did not reach her eyes. She said, "This place makes too much noise." James frowned, stepping inside, glancing around the dusty corners. His brow furrowed as though measuring her words against the silence. James said, "Old houses creak. That's all." His tone was steady, dismissive, but Anna heard the doubt beneath it. Somewhere deep below, the faint thud of the cellar door echoed. She stiffened, while James waved his hand dismissively and said, "Pipes, nothing more." James paced across the kitchen, his boots heavy on the warped floor. Anna followed him with anxious eyes, her breath shallow. James said, "You just need rest, Anna. Don't let this house get into your head." She bit her lip, her gaze flicking toward the cellar door. A faint tapping rose beneath them, too rhythmic to ignore. Anna whispered, "There it is again." James stopped, listening, then shook his head with a forced chuckle. James said, "Rats, basements are full of them." Anna clenched her fists, frustration edging her voice. She said that wasn't rats. It was something else. James waved off her words, eyes narrowing at the dust gathering thick along the door's frame. His expression shifted, but his voice stayed calm. James said, "You're tired, and this place is playing tricks. That's all." Anna turned away, though her pulse thundered in her ears. She whispered, "The house knows I'm here." James stared at her, his jaw tightening, then deliberately changed the subject, unwilling to acknowledge her fear. Later that day, Anna stood in the living room surrounded by half-open boxes. James leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, surveying her unease. James said, "You've been through a lot. This house just feels heavier because of that." Anna shot him a sharp look, anger trembling in her voice. She said, "You think I imagined a scream? You think I wanted to see shadows move?" James sighed, rubbing his temples, his voice steady but strained. James said, "Stress can make anyone see things. It doesn't mean they're real." Anna's chest tightened, her throat burning with unspoken words. She turned her back, pressing a hand against the wall. The wood was cold, and beneath it she felt a faint vibration, like a heartbeat in the house. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She said, "Tell me you feel that." James shifted uncomfortably, pressing his palm against the wall too. He quickly pulled back, shaking his head. James said, "It's nothing, just the old structure." His denial burned brighter than the chill in the room. By evening, storm clouds gathered outside, thunder rolling across the distance. The house seemed to welcome the storm, its timbers groaning with each gust. Anna lit a small lamp, its glow weak against the growing dark. James stood at the window, staring out at the restless trees. James said, "Storms make everything worse. Houses complain when the weather shifts." Anna shook her head, her voice low and sharp. She said, "This house complains even in silence." A crack of thunder shook the glass, rattling frames along the wall. From below, the cellar door groaned, opening slightly before slamming shut. Anna flinched, her breath catching, eyes fixed on the hallway. James clenched his jaw, refusing to turn, his voice clipped. James said, "Wind. That's all." But his hand trembled against the window frame. Anna whispered, "You heard it. Don't lie to me." James stayed silent, his face pale, his denial more fragile than ever. The storm raged into night, rain pelting the roof like countless fingers. The house moaned with the wind, but beneath it all came a sound unmistakable, laughter rising faintly from the cellar. Anna staggered back, clutching her chest, her eyes wide with horror. She said, "Do you hear it? Please tell me you hear it." James stiffened, his face pale, but shook his head forcefully. James said nothing, just thunder. His voice cracked, betraying him. Anna's hands shook violently, tears welling as she pressed against the wall. She whispered, "It's alive. It wants me here." The cellar door rattled once, then fell silent, as though satisfied with her fear. James swallowed hard, refusing to meet her eyes, clinging to his disbelief. James said, "It's not real. It can't be real." Yet the look on his face betrayed what his words refused. The storm outside screamed in chorus with the silence within, sealing Anna's dread into the heart of the house. The storm had passed, leaving the house in a suffocating silence. Anna wandered into the hallway, her skin crawling from the memory of laughter in the cellar. The shadows seemed deeper now, clinging to the corners like smoke. A sudden knock on the door jolted her, and when she opened it, a woman stood there draped in a long coat. Her eyes were sharp, carrying knowledge that unsettled. Clara said, "You shouldn't be here alone." Anna stepped back, wary, but something in Clara's voice demanded attention. Clara entered, her gaze sweeping across the house with quiet familiarity. Anna said, "You know this place." Clara nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. Clara said, "It keeps secrets, and it keeps them well." The words chilled Anna, who clenched her fists and whispered, "What secrets?" Clara did not answer. Instead, she moved toward the cellar door, running her fingers over its scars as though tracing old wounds. Clara said, "It watches, always." The air grew colder, and Anna felt her stomach twist as if she had welcomed something she could not turn away. Anna followed Clara into the kitchen, unsettled by her silence. The house groaned faintly, as though reacting to Clara's presence. Clara placed her bag on the table, opening it to reveal old, brittle papers. Anna leaned closer, her voice trembling. Anna said, "What are those?" Clara's eyes narrowed as she spread the yellowed sheets. Clara said, "Histories. Records of what this house holds." Anna glanced nervously at the cellar door visible down the hallway, her heart hammering. She whispered, "Something lives down there." Clara's lips pressed into a thin line, her tone grave. Clara said, "Not something. Many things. It feeds on fear and memory." Anna's face drained of color, her throat tightening. She stammered, "Why me?" Clara looked at her with eyes filled with both pity and warning. Clara said, "Because you opened the door, and once it knows your name, it never lets go." Anna froze, realizing the house had claimed her long before she understood. That night, the whispers returned, threading through the walls like restless insects. Anna sat with her arms wrapped around herself, watching Clara, who sat calmly with a lantern burning between them. The flickering light cast Clara's face into sharp shadows. Anna said, "You aren't afraid?" Clara looked up slowly, her expression calm. Clara said, "Fear is what it wants. If you give it none, it weakens." Anna shook her head, voice breaking. Anna said, "It already knows me. I hear it calling." Clara leaned closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Clara said, "Then you must listen but never answer." Anna's chest tightened, her heart pounding against her ribs. A scratching sound rose beneath the floorboards, circling them like an animal waiting to strike. Anna clamped her hands over her ears, rocking slightly. Clara remained unmoving, her gaze fixed on the dark hallway. Clara said, "The more you resist, the louder it becomes." Anna's eyes filled with tears, trapped between defiance and despair. The next morning brought no relief. Anna stood at the cracked mirror above the sink, splashing water on her face. Her reflection flickered, lagging behind her movement. Anna gasped, gripping the counter tightly. She whispered, "It's not me." Behind her, Clara appeared silently, watching with measured calm. Clara said, "It's showing you what it wants, not what is." Anna turned sharply, her eyes wide. She said, "Why does it want me?" Clara's gaze hardened, her voice low. Clara said, "Because you belong to its story now." Anna's stomach churned, her breath coming fast. She backed away, but her reflection in the mirror lingered unnaturally, mouth moving though no sound emerged. Clara lifted her hand and placed it on Anna's shoulder, her grip grounding. Clara said, "Do not answer what it speaks. Not yet." Anna shut her eyes tightly, but the sound of her reflection's laughter followed her into the silence. As night fell again, Anna and Clara sat in the living room, the house creaking as if alive. Clara lit candles, their flames bending though no wind stirred. Anna whispered, "It wants me to go down there." Clara's eyes glinted in the candlelight. Clara said, "It always lures them down. That is how it binds." Anna shivered, pulling her knees close. She said, "I saw her. The old woman, she moved." Clara's face darkened, her voice heavy. Clara said, "She is not what she was. She belongs to it now." Anna felt tears streak down her cheeks, the weight of dread sinking deeper. She said, "Then, I will never escape." Clara looked at her with grim certainty. Clara said, "Not unless you face it. Running only feeds its hunger." A sharp knock echoed suddenly at the cellar door. Both women froze, eyes locked on the sound. The knock came again, slow and deliberate, shaking the air with promise of what waited below. The night pressed heavily on the house, the storm gone but leaving behind a restless silence. Anna sat by the fire, her face pale, staring into the flames as though answers might emerge. Clara sat across from her, calm as ever, her eyes reflecting shadows. Anna said, "It knows me now, Clara. I hear it even when the house is quiet." Clara's voice was steady, her tone like stone. Clara said, "It has always known you. It whispers because it waits." Anna turned toward her, anger sharpening through fear. She said, "Why won't you tell me everything?" Clara leaned forward, her fingers laced, and her voice dropped low. Clara said, "Because some truths weaken you before they save you." Suddenly, the floor beneath them trembled as though something massive stirred below. The flames bent sharply, and a shriek echoed through the walls. Anna covered her ears, tears brimming in her eyes. She cried out, "It's coming for me." Clara remained still, her face carved in iron. Clara said, "Then be ready to face it." Later, Anna wandered alone into the hallway, unable to sleep. The cellar door loomed, the wood slick with damp, the air heavy with rot. Her hand reached out without her willing it, trembling inches from the knob. Anna whispered, "It wants me to open it." A voice behind her made her jump. James stood in the shadows, his face pale, his eyes hollow. James said, "Don't feed it. Don't give it what it wants." Anna's chest tightened, relief and fear colliding. She said, "You heard it too. You know I'm not mad." James rubbed his hands together nervously, his eyes darting toward the door. James said, "I heard enough to never come back here, but I couldn't stay away." Anna stepped closer, her voice raw. Anna said, "Then help me. Please." James shook his head violently, sweat glistening on his brow. James said, "You can't fight something that isn't alive." The cellar door rattled violently, interrupting them. Anna stumbled back, her heart hammering. James muttered, "It's awake again." By morning, the tension had thickened into something suffocating. Clara brewed tea in the kitchen, her movements calm, but her eyes never leaving Anna. Anna sat rigid at the table, her face drained of color. She said, "James heard it too. He's not denying it anymore." Clara placed the steaming cup before her, her voice clipped. Clara said, "It doesn't matter who hears, it only matters who answers." Anna's throat tightened, and she shook her head. She whispered, "Then I'm already lost." Clara's expression softened slightly, though her voice carried no comfort. Clara said, "Lost only if you surrender. The cellar breathes because of fear, and you've given it plenty." Anna slammed her hands against the table, her voice cracking. She said, "How do I stop it?" Clara leaned close, her face etched with shadows. Clara said, "You must descend, but once you step down, you cannot step back." Anna froze, the words echoing through her bones, like a death sentence. The day dragged on like a heavy chain, every sound amplified into menace. Anna sat in her bedroom, the cracked mirror across the room reflecting a faint outline of herself. She turned away, but the reflection lingered unnaturally, lips moving in silent mockery. She whispered, "Stop it." A faint laugh filled the room, curling into her ears. The reflection's mouth widened into a smile too sharp, too wrong. Anna clutched her blanket, trembling. Suddenly the door creaked, and James appeared, his eyes darting nervously. James said, "You shouldn't be alone." Anna's tears slipped down her cheeks as she shook her head. She said, "It never leaves me alone." James stepped further into the room, his voice low. James said, "It wants you broken before it takes you." The reflection behind her twisted again, now showing Clara standing where James stood, though in reality Clara was nowhere near. Anna screamed, covering her face. James rushed forward, shouting, "Don't look at it." As night fell once more, the air inside the house grew unbearable. Every creak sounded like a step, every shadow seemed alive. Anna stood in the hallway, the cellar door pulsing faint light through its cracks. Clara appeared beside her, her face lined with grim determination. Clara said, "It will not stop until you confront it." Anna shook her head violently, her hands trembling. She said, "It wants me to die." Clara's voice cut sharp. Clara said, "No, it wants you to belong." James stood at the far end of the hallway, his face pale, torn between fleeing and staying. James said, "You'll never come back if you go down." Anna's heart hammered, tears spilling freely, as she reached for the knob. She whispered, "Then let it end tonight." The door rattled under her touch, the light glowing brighter as if the house itself exhaled in anticipation. Clara and James stood frozen, watching as Anna twisted the knob, the moment pulling them all into the jaws of the unknown. The cellar door opened with a groan that echoed through the house like a funeral bell. Anna stepped back, trembling, her eyes locked on the black void yawning below. Clara placed a firm hand on her shoulder, her voice steady but cold. Clara said, "Now it begins." James stood further down the hallway, shaking his head violently. James said, "Don't go down there, Anna. Once you step inside, you're part of it." Anna's voice cracked as she whispered, "I already am." Clara's gaze was sharp, almost pitying. Clara said, "You must see what it hides." Suddenly, a cold draught rose from the darkness, carrying with it a smell of rotten soil. Anna gagged, her knees weak, but Clara steadied her. The sound of faint whispers drifted upward, many voices speaking in broken tones. Anna covered her ears, tears falling, and cried out, "Make it stop!" The house shuddered in response, as if mocking her plea. Clara whispered, "The cellar has been waiting for you." Anna descended the first step, her breath shallow, her hand gripping the rail that shuddered beneath her touch. The air was damp, heavy with the stench of earth and decay. James called from above, his voice breaking. James said, "Come back. Don't let it have you." Anna paused, her heart pounding, and looked upward. Clara stood motionless near the door, her eyes never leaving Anna. Clara said, "She cannot turn back now." Anna's legs shook, but the voices below grew louder, pulling her deeper. She whispered, "I hear them calling." James groaned, slamming his hand against the wall. James said, "You'll die down there." Clara's voice sliced through the air, sharp and final. Clara said, "No. She will learn the truth." Anna forced herself down another step, each creak echoing like a scream. The shadows seemed to reach upward, curling around her ankles as if dragging her into the abyss. The cellar was colder than the grave, its walls slick with moisture, lined with rotting shelves. Anna clutched her chest, gasping as shadows shifted along the stone. Clara's voice floated from above, calm yet distant. Clara said, "Keep walking. It will show you." Anna's steps faltered as her eyes landed on a figure, slumped in the corner. Her breath caught, trembling as she whispered, "The old woman." The figure twitched, her skeletal frame draped in rags, her head lifting slowly. The old woman said, "You came back." Anna screamed, stumbling backward, but the shadows behind her seemed to push her forward. James' muffled shout echoed faintly from above. "Anna, get out!" The old woman rose with a sickening crack of bones, her eyes black voids. Anna shook her head in terror. Anna cried, "You're dead!" The old woman's laugh rasped like breaking glass. The air thickened, pressing against Anna's chest, forcing her to her knees. Anna crawled backward, her fingers scraping across the damp stone floor. The old woman stepped forward, her twisted limbs jerking unnaturally. Anna's voice cracked as she whispered, "What are you?" The old woman tilted her head sharply, lips peeling into a grotesque grin. The old woman said, "I was like you once. Now I belong to it." Anna's body shook violently, her tears streaking her cheeks. She said, "I don't want to belong." The old woman laughed, a hollow shrieking sound that echoed endlessly. From above, Clara's voice cut through, sharp and commanding. Clara said, "Do not listen to her." Anna screamed back, her voice breaking. Anna said, "She's alive, Clara, she's alive." The old woman lunged suddenly, her hands reaching like claws. Anna scrambled to her feet, her breath ragged, heart slamming against her ribs. Shadows swirled violently around the cellar, the walls seeming to close in tighter. The cellar erupted with shrieks, voices overlapping, filling the air like a storm of whispers. Anna clutched her head, collapsing to her knees. She cried, "Stop, please stop." The old woman loomed over her, her face inches away, eyes bottomless. The old woman said, "You are already mine." Suddenly, James charged down the stairs, his face pale, sweat pouring down. James shouted, "Leave her alone." He grabbed Anna's arm, trying to pull her up, but the shadows lashed around him, wrapping like ropes. Clara's voice rang from above, sharp and unyielding. Clara shouted, "Do not fight it with fear. Stand against it." Anna's tears streamed as she forced herself up, clutching James' arm tightly. Anna said, "I will not belong to you." The voices screeched louder, shaking the cellar, the old woman's face twisting into rage. The walls cracked, dirt and dust falling like rain, as the house itself roared in fury. The cellar roared as if the walls themselves carried voices, the whispers swelling into screams. Anna clung to James, her body trembling under the crushing weight of sound. Clara descended the stairs at last, her lantern held high. Clara said, "The truth cannot be hidden anymore." Anna turned, her face pale, streaked with tears. She said, "What truth? Tell me." Clara's eyes glimmered in the dim light, her voice steady but cold. Clara said, "This house belonged to your bloodline. The old woman is not a stranger. She is your kin." Anna staggered back, her hand pressed to her chest, her breath sharp. She whispered, "No, that's not possible." The old woman hissed from the shadows, her skeletal face twisting. The old woman said, "You are mine, child, you always were." James shouted, pulling Anna away. James said, "Don't listen." The cellar groaned, dust falling from the ceiling as cracks split the stone. Clara said, "She has to listen, or none of us will leave alive." Anna fell to her knees, her heart racing as Clara's words cut into her. She said, "You knew all along." Clara's face was unflinching, her tone like iron. Clara said, "I told you this house keeps its secrets. It was never coincidence you came here." James stepped in front of Anna, his voice shaking. James said, "Then she should never have set foot here." Clara shook her head, her voice sharp. Clara said, "She had no choice. Blood calls to blood." The old woman stepped closer, her movements jerking, her voice echoing. The old woman said, "You feel me inside you, don't you? My curse is your curse." Anna sobbed, clutching her head, her voice trembling. Anna said, "I won't be you." The lantern flickered violently, shadows darting across the walls, faces appearing in the dark. Clara said, "The house was waiting, Anna, and now it will finish what it began." The cellar air grew heavier, thick with the stench of rot and smoke. Anna gasped for breath, feeling her chest compress. Clara lifted the lantern higher, her face lined with shadows. Clara said, "The truth binds you, but it can also break you free." Anna's voice cracked. Anna said, "How?" The old woman cackled, her laugh rattling like bones. The old woman said, "She lies. There is no freedom. Only belonging." James pulled Anna closer, shouting, "Fight her, Anna. Don't let her inside you." Anna trembled, staring into the old woman's black eyes. She said, "Why me? Why not her?" The old woman's face twisted, and she rasped, "Because you are the last. You are the door." Clara lowered her gaze, her silence speaking louder than words. Anna's tears fell freely, the weight of her bloodline crushing her as the cellar floor cracked open beneath her feet. The floor split wider, shadows crawling out like smoke given form. Anna screamed as hands clawed from the cracks, reaching for her ankles. James fought to pull her back, his teeth clenched. James shouted, "Hold on! Don't let go!" Clara shouted over the roar, her voice commanding. Clara said, "Stand! Claim your name, or you will drown in theirs." Anna's voice shook as she cried, "I don't even know who I am anymore." The old woman shrieked, her laughter deafening. The old woman said, "You are mine, child. Your soul belongs below." Anna kicked against the grasping hands, sweat dripping down her face. James roared, pulling her upward with all his strength. Clara raised the lantern, its light burning brighter, pushing the shadows back slightly. Clara said, "Say it, Anna. Say who you are." Anna's chest heaved, her throat raw, yet her words caught in terror. The lantern flared, blinding in its glow, throwing the cellar into violent chaos. Anna forced herself to her feet, her voice shaking. Anna shouted, "I am not yours." The old woman screamed, her body twisting violently, shadows peeling away from her form. James held Anna steady, his arms around her shoulders. James said, "Keep going, don't stop." Clara stood tall, her eyes fixed on Anna, her voice ringing with urgency. Clara said, "You are stronger than this house. Claim it." The voices of the cellar shrieked, thousands crying in fury. Anna sobbed, lifting her head, her voice breaking but strong. Anna said, "I am Anna. I will not belong to you." The old woman collapsed backward into the shadows, her screams echoing as the floor sealed shut. The cellar groaned one last time, dust falling like ash. Silence followed, heavy and final, leaving the three of them gasping in the fading lantern light. The cellar grew still after the final roar, the silence almost suffocating. Anna stood trembling, her chest heaving, while James clung to her arm for balance. Clara lowered the lantern, her face pale but steady. Clara said, "It is not over. Silence does not mean freedom." Anna's voice cracked as she whispered, "She's gone. I saw her fall." Clara shook her head, eyes fixed on the sealed cracks. Clara said, "What is buried can rise again." James groaned, clutching his side, his voice hoarse. James said, "Then let's burn this place down." Clara turned sharply, her tone fierce. Clara said, "You cannot destroy what is tied to you, Anna." Anna staggered back, tears blurring her vision. She said, "It will never leave me." The lantern flickered, shadows shifting along the walls like living things. Clara whispered, "It never leaves, it waits." They returned upstairs, the house groaning with each step as though displeased. The air was thick, carrying the stench of smoke and rot. Anna collapsed into a chair, her hands shaking uncontrollably. James paced the room, his jaw tight. James said, "We should leave. Tonight. Never look back." Clara stood near the window, her gaze fixed on the storm clouds gathering outside. Clara said, "It will follow her wherever she goes." Anna looked up in despair, her voice faint. Anna said, "Then I'm cursed." Clara's face softened only slightly, but her words were harsh. Clara said, "Blood curses do not vanish. They cling, waiting for weakness." James slammed his fist against the wall, his anger breaking through fear. James said, "There must be a way." The walls shuddered in response, a low groan echoing like laughter. Anna buried her face in her hands, whispering, "It already knows I'm afraid." Night deepened, the house cloaked in darkness save for candlelight. Anna's reflection in the cracked mirror across the room twisted again, her lips moving while her own mouth stayed closed. She whispered, "No, not again." James rushed to her side, gripping her shoulders. James said, "Don't look at it." But the reflection smiled, and the voice of the old woman filled the room. The old woman said, "You may banish me, but I remain in you." Anna screamed, backing away, knocking over the candle. Clara caught it swiftly, her face carved in shadow. Clara said, "It shows itself because you still belong to it." Anna cried out, her voice raw. Anna said, "I told it no. I told it I'm not hers." Clara whispered, "But fear is still hers." James pulled Anna into his arms, holding her as she sobbed. The mirror cracked further, a thin line splitting across the glass like a wound. The storm outside rattled the windows, but the louder sound came from the cellar below, a slow pounding like a heartbeat. Anna rose shakily, staring down the hallway. Anna whispered, "It's calling me again." James stepped in front of her, shaking his head. James said, "You don't have to answer. Not this time." Clara stood between them, her voice cutting through the air. Clara said, "If she doesn't face it now, it will rise stronger." Anna trembled, her tears streaming. She said, "I can't survive it again." The pounding grew louder, rattling the walls, dust falling from the ceiling. James shouted, "Then we'll fight it together." Clara shook her head, her eyes dark with certainty. Clara said, "It only wants her." Anna's breath caught, her legs trembling as she stepped past James. She whispered, "Then I'll go." Anna reached the cellar door one final time, her hand trembling as it closed around the knob. The pounding stopped abruptly, replaced by silence that rang louder than sound. James whispered from behind, his voice breaking. James said, "Don't do this." Clara's voice was sharp, unrelenting. Clara said, "She has no choice." Anna closed her eyes, her breath ragged, whispering, "Let it end." The door creaked open, the void inside darker than night. For a moment, nothing stirred. Then from the shadows came the old woman's whisper, soft and terrible. The old woman said, "Welcome home." Anna's scream tore through the house as the door slammed shut behind her. James lunged forward, pounding on the wood, shouting her name. Clara turned away, her eyes glistening, whispering to herself. Clara said, "The house always takes its own." The hallway fell silent, leaving only the faint sound of laughter rising from the cellar, promising the story was far from over.